Both.
See, come on. Oh, we're recording. Leave meeting. Big Brother's watching.
Right? Remember not to say anything scandalous.
Yes. Don't talk about COVID either. Supposedly that throttles your.
It'd be so nice if next time we do this, we need like a TV.
That would be cool.
So that way we
they
can see
have the
everybody.
TV there. But
Yeah, but it would be nice to hissing.
I don't think you can actually see meeting attendees.
Um,
There's already like 10 people in. So.
yeah, I don't know if you can, but
Hello.
there people are joining in, so we'll give everyone a chance to join here. Y'all can entertain with your crazy marlin attacks and shark attacks and pole spears through hands and keep everyone occupied until that point.
That'd be so painful.
Do you want to just do like a rundown of like crappy medical stories from spearfishing?
So we should start it. You guys will love spearfishing.
You guys
Let's
want to go
terrify you
spearfishing
first.
Yeah, it seems a great sport.
Have you shot yourself, or is that just Dan?
Just Dan.
Ooh,
I haven't shot myself yet.
How did that happen?
Well,
Should we
In the
tell?
fin.
Is it? Oh, in the fin. Okay.
yeah.
I was gonna say, are we gonna be spreading people's dirt?
No, we'll do that in the safety.
Dan
section.
just happens to
To
be
be
on
fair-
Pull the
be
trigger
fair,
accidentally,
shot
or did the
himself.
gun just misfire?
I think it misfired.
Yeah. To be fair,
Crappy
he shot
season.
himself in my fin that he was borrowing, so I feel like I've earned the right to tell the story.
I feel like that should have been a poll question. Like, have you shot yourself? Has your dive buddy shot you?
Do you have experience? How much experience? I've shot a fish. I've shot my buddy. I've shot myself.
Yeah, that would have been a good multiple choice. Yeah, definitely want to wait just a few to let people that
We had
maybe
like
didn't get
100 people registered. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might go over to the other link.
Wow.
So we've got
Oh
the-
yeah, that's right.
DHA board members is going to man that one and drive traffic over here.
Very
Just-
very nice of him.
Yes, to make sure we're not missing anybody. But for those of you that are here, howdy everybody. We'll continue to keep you entertained with your
This
spearfishing
is-
horror stories until that point.
This is a fair time to get your pint ready for pint night. You
That's-
have a moment to just make sure it's a perfect pour. You know, the head just to the top, barely rolling over. Make sure it's good beer, please.
I think I fail on all accounts.
Oh
That
no, that looks
or
like that
cheap
looks like
beer.
Budweiser or Coors.
Close.
Definitely not a
Hey.
full
Stella?
16-ounce pint.
Heineken.
Kona
Oh,
Longboat.
oh,
little
that's
better.
not a bad beer.
Way above. No
Yeah,
way.
I mean, it's pretty much on the same
Yeah.
level. Of
Sorry,
light
Kona
beers.
Brewing Company.
I'm drinking a Monster because I've been up since 4 a.m. and I couldn't get coffee. So.
And that's actually worse than Bud Light.
oh, it's
so
definitely worse than.
we judge you the most.
What just happened? Cancel. All right. Super
know what?
entertaining, guys. Sorry, Instagram. I'm doing everything for the gram, right? This is all
Terrible.
for the gram.
No, it's
Um,
not.
Are we gonna get Andrew to twerk?
We can.
Let your hair down.
That comes in
Relax a
later.
little.
That comes in the safety section. Thank you very much.
Charlie let his hair down. He's looking good.
Yeah.
So, Charlie, how
Slick
is
back.
how are the conditions down in Mexico? I feel like you're kind of cheating because this is BHA of California,
Mhm.
and you
Right.
are in
Yeah.
Baja California, and
Yeah.
I hate you for it.
Yeah, I get a text from him. He's like, "Sorry, I couldn't get to your email. I was literally diving all day."
Mm.
Yeah. The conditions are good. It's the water's like 83 right now. It's sort of mixed though. So like there's at like 60 feet, there's a thermocline that it turns to like, you know, mid 60s or something. So it shocks you pretty good if you're going that deep.
I don't think
but,
anyone in this panel
I
tonight
haven't
is gonna go
really-
that deep.
Yeah, probably not.
I don't know.
Uh,
You'd be surprised. Some of the athletic guys have the best breath hold times. Guys that have like never tried
Yeah.
before come out with like 5.5 minute
I
breath
felt
holds.
so bad. There was a guy in my freediving class who had a 5.5 minute static in the pool, and he could not get past 10 feet in the ocean.
Oh, equalization. That
Yeah.
sucks.
What's equalization or just technique. You know, you see some people that just like they're on the surface there, and then it's just like watching like a I don't know, like a flailing
It's so funny.
robin
I'm
like
gonna-
fall into a pond or something. You know, they just
I
can't get
adore
below
my
the
wife.
surface, you know.
I adore her, and I won't speak negatively of her, other than her duck dive is hilarious. she'll stick her feet out and then kick like push that way, so she's
Yeah,
stabbing
kick
out
in
of the
the air,
water,
right.
and she never gets her feet
Yeah.
below the water. You just see from above this going like
Yeah.
that, and she's trying so hard to get down, and she never does.
Is that why you pushed me down to the monkey face
Yeah.
the other
Uh-huh.
day?
Just-
Yeah.
Developing bad habits with your wife?
Yeah, just pushing you down. Right here. So Andrew got his shaft stuck in a monkey-faced eel, which is terrible fish to shoot in the first place, but he's got this mission to make them taste good.
They do taste good.
And blurry. And he was trying to get it out, and so I came over to help him, and I was trying to pull it out, and it was hard, and then like he was struggling to get down at one point to get to the right angle, so I just got the back of him and shoved him underwater. We're only like 8 feet of water, so it was good.
Everyone else on shore just thought he was drowning
I feel-
somebody.
Yeah,
Get
yeah.
down there! Get down there!
What about morays? Do you guys
I feel like
Yeah,
that's
go-
a.
eat or
They're
shoot
good at
morays?
fire up. No.
No, I've never heard of
I
anyone
don't shoot
eating
them,
them,
but I
but
see a shitload of them down here.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know they've got really bad ciguatera problems in most of the world.
That's in Hawaii. I did a bunch of research into this. I don't believe there's ever been any evidence in like California of sig with morays or most fish, but I've eaten a couple of them. They're actually not bad. They're a little bony in the bottom third, especially if you take the bones and you boil down the bones and you make like an eel sauce to go over the
Nice.
top. It can be really tasty. But I actually shot one with a pole spear once, and it ended up wrapping around my pole spear and bending that thing into like a 45-degree angle.
Wow.
Like
That's
they're
crazy.
so strong.
So my very first spearfishing story ever was a moray eel. I was in Hawaii, and I hadn't started actually spearfishing yet, but I was like thinking about it. And so I go to visit my family. They live in Kona. And I took an ADT home security little pole that was like maybe 3 feet long, and I took the sign off of it. And then I sharpened a chopstick and like taped it to the front of it. And I didn't have a band or anything for the back. So I'm just swimming through with this stolen like security sign out of a front yard with a chopstick on the end of it. And I found a moray eel, and I was like, I'm going to get this thing. And I jammed as hard as I could, and cheap bamboo chopstick just goes boing.
Yeah.
And the moray was furious. It started freaking out and like doing all this stuff because it has like the worst earache ever now. And then I go to this crazy Hawaii. Luckily, it swam off. But I go to this party with a bunch of native Hawaiians, big old guys, and they're like, "That's the guy that did that with it." Somebody had talked about seeing me do it earlier, and that dude's crazy. Those things will mess you up. Like I don't know
yeah.
how to speak like a
Getting-
Hawaiian, so I guess they sound Hispanic.
Getting bit by a moray eel is no joke.
They can
Oh, there
take
you go.
they can deglove your hand, like your finger. They'll
Mhm.
take everything off your finger to the bone.
Yep.
You just see like rows and rows and rows and rows of teeth going down the neck. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Well, we're 10 minutes in. Do we want to give it much more time, do you think?
I think we might as well get started. We may get some people trickling in, but let's rock and roll. So why don't I introduce you guys? Well, I guess I'll just say my name is Devin. I'm the California chapter coordinator with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and stoked to have this crew from Fin Forage here with us. Fin Forage is a community-based organization composed of environmental scientists, marine biologists, freedive instructors, photographers, professional chefs, a lot of really, really cool people. They bring wealth of knowledge regarding freediving, spearfishing, foraging, all guided by the best practices for dive safety, sustainability, and of course, cooking and eating some of the best seafood on the planet. So with that being said, I will let you guys take it away, and cheers. And thanks again for being here.
Cheers. Well, let's all start it the right way. Monster, you need to switch soon.
We will see. If you want me sleeping on the table, yeah, maybe.
My name is Eric Keener. I am one of the founders of Fin Forage. We're just a group of guys that's really passionate about spearfishing, and kind of have a little bit of a different take on it. We really care about what you do with the fish, not necessarily like the size of it or how many you can get. Your hunting prowess is cool, but our goal is to help newer divers become safer and better divers, and hopefully help them enjoy just a ridiculously rad sport. And it's so there's so much to enjoy in the ocean. It's otherworldly. So you guys, a lot of you guys hunt on land. If you get into that mindset when you're in nature and you're pretty remote and you're just taking in the sunset or the sunrise probably, and over the hills and stuff, like we have that same experience all the time underwater. There's all of these wild alien type creatures. There's huge columns of gorgeous golden kelp swaying. It really is a truly magnificent otherworldly experience. So just right off the bat, know that spearfishing it is a wonderful, wonderful thing to try. And our whole goal at Fin Forage is to help newer divers be able to explore safely. So we offer things like dive education. We have dive instructors that can help with questions you have or help train you. We do a lot of spearfishing 101 type stuff. What should you really know right out of the gate? We'll talk a lot about that today, this evening. Fish ID, fish behavior, interacting with your environment. And then there's a conservation and sustainability side of what we do. We've been connecting with a lot of the local regulatory agencies and people like BHA, which we're so thankful for you guys and what you do and having us for Pint Night tonight. And then of course there's the food aspect. I love to cook. I like to get weird in the kitchen, and that kind of spawned an idea for what we could do as a team. So we do have an awesome team. I'm so fortunate to have incredible professional photographers like Joe Platko, who's, if you've seen BBC's Blue Planet, some of his footage is in there. It's insane. The guy, just anytime he hops in the water with us, comes out with wild pictures. So you go check out our Instagram or our website. You'll see why we think spearfishing is awesome. It's really beautiful and well done. We've got some of the team here today. We have two of the founders, Ryan and Andrew. Andrew is, I would be willing to bet if you pick the guy that's read the most spearfishing forums on the planet, I'm pretty confident that Andrew's read more. So anytime I have a question about something, I'm like, hey, Andrew, can you tell me about this? He'll go like, well, back in the 80s, this guy posted about this thing that was a percentage off if you sand it. Like, it's just insane the amount of knowledge he has. So he's kind of the encyclopedia of Fin Forage. Charlie's awesome, kind of, because I've just been majorly jealous of him for the last like year while he's lived in Baja with his lovely gal, diving regularly, picking huge fish and just eating awesome food all the time. But he's also our resident gun expert. If there's anything about the wild mathematics that we won't get into of band percentage stretches on inverted roller guns, I don't know. It's just, he gets into it so deep. He's got so much information and currently way more experience than anybody else in diving because he's just out there all the time. And he's a stud. He's been getting all kinds of accolades on his diving and depths and stuff like that, which is impressive. Ryan is the guy that's been here from the beginning. He's like, hey, I'll help you film some stuff. I'm like, cool, let's go dive. And he's really actually proven to be kind of the engine behind Fin and Forage. He puts in an incredible amount of work, behind the scenes stuff, administrative stuff, making sure. I'm kind of like an all over the place guy. I'm like, that's shiny and cool. Ooh, let's try to do that. Let's do a video on this. And he's like, no, like, let's chill. Let's take this thing right.
I mean, for anyone who hunts and got into hunting, obviously there are the people who grew up hunting and fishing, and then there are people who got into it later. That is a great lesson. If you have something to give to the community, that's exactly how I got into spearfishing. I'm like, this guy seems to know what he's doing, and he seems like he wants to film things. I'm like, I have a camera. Can we trade? Will you take me fishing? And that's how I got into it. And then all of a sudden, it turned into Fin and Forage, which has been an absolute. It's been a monster, and it's been amazing. And so, very fortunate to have met these guys, and we're super happy to hopefully share some of that information, get you guys excited about the sport, and hopefully get a couple more spearfisher women out of this.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That's a little bit about us. We want to hear about you guys. So of the people on right now, we're going to put up a little bit of a poll so we know what the audience is like and what the experience level's at. So we're going to put up a poll that says if you've ever spearfished before, yes or no.
Yep, I'm going to throw that poll up. We already have one question, though. I feel like I have to address this one This is from Lee
I
Ham,
looked at that.
and it says, "How come Devin misses so many fish?" An excellent question, Lee.
I hope
So,
he's
you know, really what it comes down to, I believe, is that I did my study abroad in South America, and the ocean currents and the Coriolis effect is really different down there. So I'm still recalibrating to the northern hemisphere.
It's pretty solid.
Right?
There's myriad
solid
variables.
excuse.
Science. It's just science, okay? All right.
Scientific fact.
So your wife
All one.
has to clean. Do you have aiming problems at home too? I guess I shouldn't say your wife has to clean it. That's kind of sexist. I didn't know. Sorry. women.
Anyways, have you ever spearfished before?
Oh, I can't vote.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
And-
but yes, otherwise we're gonna have to have the conversation.
And I do have to
You
throw the
guys-
caveat. I
or
do have to
yes.
throw the caveat in there because most people, like I did, got started in spearfishing. Not really spearfishing, but in California there is a large, or was a large abalone diving community, and we will take that. If you've gone for scallops, if you've gone for urchin, I mean, even like a snorkeling thing, we'll take that as spearfishing. You just get in the water, fins, snorkel, dip down, hold your breath for a little bit, good to go.
With a buddy, safely. Educate yourself first.
I'm talking about
We'll get
past
into all of that
tense.
stuff.
Talking about past tense. Get into that later.
Okay, so pretty much we got most of the votes in here. You guys can continue to throw yours up there, but a little over 80% have spearfished.
Oh.
About
Ooh.
17% have not.
Oh. Okay. So we can
Right
go a little
on.
bit more in depth then. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So definitely one of the things that it doesn't matter if you have or haven't before, one of the things that we love to look at is safety. And recently spearfishermen and freedivers have gotten together and they've kind of there is a large community that do both. One of the things that I love about it is freedivers have developed these super safe kind of protocols that you and a buddy can learn. So that way, if there are things, which they are kind of uncommon, but shallow water blackout, things like that, you know what to do. You know what a samba or a loss of motor control is. And these are all very real things if you're out there chasing fish and pushing depths, whether or not you're trained, which there are certifications in freediving, or you're not. So that is something that even if you are experienced, if you haven't looked into that stuff, please take the time to at least learn up on it. We sent Devin a link, which I believe he will put up, to a free class by a world champion freediver named Ted Hardy. And he goes through all of these things. It doesn't take the place of a freediving class. And if you guys are ever in like Monterey or San Francisco, go into Bamboo Reef. They're a NAUI, right? NAUI certified freedive instructor. And tell them we sent you, get your little discount, and you can have a really great time in the water, but also make sure that when you go out, you come back. And I mean, that's the most important thing. The fish don't matter. Coming back safely and being safe is number one, at least in my book.
All right. So for those of you who are not avid spearfisher people or who are new to this, we wanted to kick this off by sharing some of our most memorable spearfishing experiences. And I've got two. The first is the experience that got me started spearfishing. I did my undergrad in the Bay Area and studied marine biology and was down here living in Monterey for a few semesters. I did a lot of scuba diving. I had never really fished before that. I didn't grow up in a hunting and fishing family. I remember way back in the day, my grandpa took me to some ponds behind my house with a little spin casting rod to chuck at the nothing that lived in there. And after that, I didn't really pick up a fishing rod again until college. But while I was living here in Monterey, I was doing a lot of scuba diving. And one day, most of our dives were, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. We'd often do several back to back. And so I didn't have a lot of time I tried eating breakfast before a dive once or twice and had the less than satisfying experience of projectile vomiting through my regulator 80 feet below the surface. One of those life experiences that glad I have, don't want to repeat.
It's called chumming.
It is called chumming. We'll get to that. Don't worry, we will get to that. So I typically didn't eat before dives, and one morning, we just had this most incredible dive on a deeper reef here in front of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And in the summer, we get really thick algae blooms that kind of darken up the first 30 feet or so of the water, and also really thick jellyfish blooms.
When he says algae blooms, it's like you have to use a flashlight when you get below it because it can be literally pitch black below the layer.
And when you're in it, like you can't see your hand in front of your face sometimes.
Nasty.
It is nasty. So this particular day, we were down around 70 feet, and it was pitch black. And that first 30 feet, like I descended holding on to my buddy like this, because I knew if I lost him, we were done. We were going to have to cancel the dive. Once we got down below 30 feet, it opened up to the most incredible crystal clear water I'd ever seen here. But pitch black. And we descended into this field of boulders that just looked like a moonscape. And I'm swimming along. And at some point I remember looking up, and above me was just this bright purple like trail of jellyfish moving through the sky above me. And it was the most serene experience. And I exhaled really gently, and my chest settled down on a ledge, and I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I had two thoughts. First was, holy shit, I just fell asleep 70 feet underwater. I could have died. And the second was, wow, that lingcod that's sitting out there in front of me looks really tasty, and I'm hungry. So the next day I went out, I bought a spear gun, and I started learning how to spearfish.
I'm surprised you fell asleep in one breath.
One breath. I was tired, man.
He was narked.
I was narked. The second experience was the first time that I met Eric. This was a couple of years into my spearfishing experience. I'd gotten a lot of dives under my belt. I built my own gun at this point, was having a grand old time, and had a wetsuit to sell, and Eric wanted to buy my wetsuit. So we go to Pebble Beach. I meet up with Eric for the very first time, sell him the wetsuit. I also meet a very good friend of mine now, Dan Levy, who moved here from Australia a few years ago, grew up spearfishing in beautiful tropical waters, was interested to get back into the sport, but had never dived in California, didn't know what to expect, and asked if I'd take him out and show him what diving in kelp was all about. So the first place we go to is Pebble Beach, and we drove down 17-mile drive and parked at the spot called Lone Cypress, which is not far from Ghost Trees.
Are we spot burning right now?
No.
Okay, well, we didn't dive there.
Not there
Big
yet.
wave surfing spot. And we get out of the car, we stack up all our gear, and then the Pebble Beach ranger comes by and tells us if we dive, he's going to write us a very big ticket and take all of our gear. So we drive a little further down the coast, jump in the water, and Eric and his friend disappear. My friend Dan proceeds to lose all of his dive gear, get entangled in the kelp. I spent about an hour and a half retrieving his weight belt, retrieving his mask, retrieving his spear gun. Finally get him.
It was nasty kelp. I've never dove that spot again since because it was like such a horrible experience.
Yeah. So we finally get Dan up and running. We kick out and we meet Eric and his buddy, who's also Dan. And at this point, I'm just like thrilled to finally be in the water. And I start doing my breathe up, which we'll get into in a little bit. But the short Cliff Notes version is just a very slow, gentle, relaxed inhalation, exhale for about twice as long as you inhaled for, and count it down for about 2 minutes. And as I was doing this, I start hearing retching. And I look up and everything looks normal. So I put my head back in the water and I hear retching again. And I look up and here's Eric's friend Daniel staring me dead in the face, projectile vomiting bright pink vomit onto me.
Oh, so funny.
We love Dan.
We love Dan. The rest of that dive, I could taste vomit in my snorkel, and it was not the world's greatest experience.
Oh.
That whole
Um,
dive's terrible. Good times.
but it's still one of my favorite dives to recount. We got a couple little tiny little rockfish, went home, made some tacos, cooked them for my dogs. They were happy. I was happy to not be covered in vomit anymore.
My now every time I want to try to bring a new friend diving and Andrew's there, he's like, does the guy get seasick? It's the prerequisite to can he dive with us? What about Charlie? You said you had some stuff to weigh in on this one, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Diving for me is like a mix of a lot of different experiences. And I think one of my most memorable actually I didn't actually get any big fish or anything like that on this trip. I was actually down here in Baja. This was several years ago. And it just happened to be a day when like the visibility was like better than I've ever seen it since, to be honest. People imagine anywhere tropical and you imagine like crystal clear visibility and so beautiful, but really here in Baja, it's almost like Northern California. Like a lot of times it's like 15 feet or something, and that's all you get. And that day it was like, it didn't matter as far as I could swim from shore, as deep as I could be, you could see the bottom anywhere, it was just great. And I did kick out from shore, in a spot sort of north of Cabo, just kind of like a surf spot that I'd never been to before. I just wanted to try it because I knew there was reef there. And I kicked out there, and the viz was just stunning. I think I actually did shoot. I went into the rocks and I shot this little fish called a giant hawkfish, which is sort of like a cabezon in Baja.
They're pretty.
And when I shot the fish, these two moray eels came. We were talking about morays earlier, and that just reminded me of this. Like, these two moray eels came out of the rocks, and it turned out these rocks were like infested with morays because there was like 50 of them in there. But these two came out and started battling over this hawkfish, and one of them like half swallowed it, and then they were attacking each other like on the end of my spear. And I'm like looking at this, what the heck am I going to do with these moray eels, So I ended up just holding on to the end of my float line and just kicking out into deeper water and waiting till they finally just like gave up and let go. But then once I was out into the deeper water, I ran into this big school of Jack Crevalle. There was like hundreds of them, and they were just like vortexing around me. And so I just started diving down and just like, you don't really shoot Jack Crevalle. They're just not good to eat, but they're big fish and they're beautiful, silvery, and just being in a school like that of such large, like ocean predator fish and so many of them was amazing. So I just did several dives down to the bottom and kind of like looked up, and just, they're all swimming in circles around me. I got so distracted doing that eventually I kind of drifted with the current out into like basically the edge of the blue water where the reef started to end. And before I know it, I'm just kind of like drifting out there, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this like big gray object. And being from Northern California, like the first thing that pops in my head is a shark. So the adrenaline picked up and kicked in, and then I realized, as it came closer, that it was a humpback whale, and it came right below me, and just like I could see its eye was huge, like that big, and it's just looking at me and like swimming by, and I just remember sitting there and just being so like awestruck by this huge creature kind of like coming up to me to say hello, and I just wanted to stay there forever, and of course it didn't. It just sort of like swam up and then swam away. But man, like I could have hung out in that moment forever. It was like one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. And that, like I said, it's not a story about a huge fish that I shot or anything like that, but it was certainly something that left an impression on me. So I mean, to me, that's what it's all about. It's like that you just can't get those experiences anywhere else.
Nice.
Right on. So
Yeah. Okay.
good.
You good?
Yeah.
What just happened?
Oh, I thought Devin
Oh.
started talking.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. What's going on, Devin?
Oh, that was just me saying no kidding. That blew my mind. I have to add this in really quickly because this is my favorite story, and it'll take 2 seconds. But I just wanted to impress upon everyone the crazy things that you may find in the ocean while spearfishing. I found a drone, all sorts of credit cards and clothes and sunglasses and just you name it. But the best one was a bird scooter that I found on my way in after shooting a fish. I can't remember what, I think it was a calico, but I'm coming in, I have a fish on my spear. I find the bird scooter. I'm like, what the hell, guys? Like, who throws this shit in the ocean? I grab it. It's like awkward to carry, so I'm pushing it. And I'm coming out of the water in La Jolla and I'm pushing the bird scooter and I got this fish on my spear and I come out and I take my mask off and I look up and there's this family there who's like probably, I don't want to judge, I don't, maybe from Alabama, who knows? Like they came here on vacation, clearly. And they're just looking at me like, did that dude just zoom around on that bird scooter and shoot a fish? Like, I didn't know they could do that.
Oh, I wish we filmed that.
So you never know what you're gonna find.
We did a catch and cook last weekend just on the topic of random stuff, and I brought bocce ball, which is a game where you like try to get the bigger balls closer to the small ball. But I had lost the small one. I wasn't sure where it was, and so we dove. And I'm like, hey Andrew, if you happen to see a golf ball, go ahead and pick that up because we need it for later.
You need a ton of golf.
And yeah, I came back and he had 2 little bulges in his in his wetsuit. And I was. Yeah, they were golf balls.
Awesome. Well, so as those of you who are new to this,
Hey, Andrew, choke up on the mic.
Speaking of that,
hello. As those of you who are new to the sport have probably gathered, freediving is really central to the kind of spearfishing that we do. Around the world, there are plenty of people who spearfish on Scuba. It's legal in California. I think it's legal in most of the U.S. states. But the bulk of the spearfishing you'll see people doing is freediving, which is just holding your breath as long as you can, relaxing your body, and diving down to the bottom, hanging out for as long as you comfortably can and safely can. To give you a sense of what that feels like, we wanted to have you all do a static breath hold. So since we can't see you, we're just going to trust that you're doing it.
So that I just want to premise real quick. I hope everybody participates. If for some reason like health is a thing, don't participate. But or poor health. Mm-hmm. But you can hold your breath a lot longer than you think you can. And when you take that big gulp of air in and hold your breath, and then you start feeling like you have to breathe, that's not you running out of oxygen. That's you building up carbon dioxide. We don't have oxygen sensors in our body that says, hey, you're about to pass out. That's why blacking out is a thing. But we do have carbon dioxide sensors that says, hey, you're building up carbon dioxide. So when you feel that urge to breathe, part of our training is to be able to be comfortable with it. And you can be comfortable with it for way longer than you think you can. So this whole exercise, we're only going to cap it at 1 minute and 45 seconds. But we also have a poll up at the end that will say, did you make it, 1 minute, minute and a half, or all the way to the end?
And one of the things you're going to notice as you do this, for those of you who do it, and one other caveat, I'm sorry, if for whatever reason you're tuning this into this webinar in a car, please don't do this exercise.
Yeah, or standing up.
Sit down, make sure you're in a safe space. You're not going to pass out, but on the off chance that you do, we want to make sure you're in a safe location. But as you do this exercise, as Eric said, the first thing you're going to feel is that urge to breathe that we're all familiar with. If you allow your body to relax through that, you're also going to feel something else as you get into that urge to breathe a little deeper. And we want to see if you can identify that.
I just saw a question come up. Can you drink beer and hold your breath? I would venture to say yes.
You can try.
I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
That would be scary.
Give me like a 5-second pre-countdown to your countdown.
Okay. Yeah. So what are you going to chug until it's time to hold your breath, or what are you doing?
This is going to be a scientific experiment. We're going to have Andrew try this with you, and worst case scenario, there'll be beer on the floor.
And can you do a 1 minute and 45 second keg stand?
He's been down in Mexico too long.
Yeah, no wonder you get
like
so
half
deep.
that in college. Maybe.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna count it down. In 15 seconds, we'll start. So just be really calm and relaxed. You got 10 seconds left. When you breathe in, do a full breathe in. Start in your belly all the way up to your shoulders and go. So we are going to start in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. I should probably call out the time. We're at 30 seconds. I'm not going to be able to hold my breath and call it out. 45 seconds. I knew this was going to happen. 1 minute. Charlie is in a place of zen. Wow. It may be getting hard. Keep holding. You're at 1:15. 30 more seconds to go. Are you holding and eating too? Wow, that's impressive. 1:30, 15 more seconds. You guys got it. 35. 1:40. And breathe. So you can apparently drink beer and eat a burrito for 1:45.
That did not make that easy.
That's hilarious.
And
Ryan and I will do max statics at the end just to
have fun with that. The other thing is too is if you are interested in because a lot of people look at this and they go, okay, I want to extend my breath hold because obviously that means more bottom time, that means more hunting time, no matter what depth. And if you are chasing depth, your breath hold is a big thing. There are a lot of really great apps out there. There is, I believe, one called Apnea. Shark Apnea is a new one. And then the one that I use, and it's kind of comforting because they talk you through it, is XPT, which is Laird Hamilton's company. They have a CO2 tolerance, breath holding kind of coursework. It's absolutely free, and they'll take you through that, and it just helps you build, and you can practice it. And honestly, once you get into it, that like freaked out of I'm holding my breath kind of goes away. I do it laying down on my couch, and probably 45% of the time I fall asleep in the middle of it because it's just so relaxing to do your breath holds. It's a whole nother world to get into. There's kind of some stuff that branches off, but we're gonna just kind of start. And I know some of you have, obviously, when people say they've spearfished before, there's different levels to that, right? So if we're starting off a little bit fresh for you guys, we apologize, but we want to also cater to the people who have never done it before and are here to learn the ins and outs of it.
Before we move too far off that breath hold, did any of you recognize that third feeling beyond just that basic urge to breathe? Did we get that far?
Is that the urge to take a drink of your beer?
The urge to take a drink of your beer. Well spotted. Well spotted.
Charlie, are you still holding your breath? You have this look on your face like, I'm still here.
Yeah. That's the third feeling.
All right. Well, seeing no comments. So that third feeling that you get is a diaphragm contraction. If you hold your breath long enough, your diaphragm deep in your chest will actually start to spasm, and you'll feel it kind of like a heave. Some people get that stronger than others, but part of this breath hold practice that Ryan and Eric have been talking about is kind of learning to be comfortable with that spasm and building up your body. Like the more you practice holding your breath, the less your body's response to those higher carbon dioxide tolerances becomes.
And to put it into perspective, I haven't been training and my breath hold sucks right now, but I can go. I think my last time training before Costa Rica a couple weeks ago, I was just under 4 minutes. And when I'm freediving, spearfishing, I'll get about 6 contractions on like a long breath hold where it's like, oh, okay, there's one. Oh, there's another one. And I'm usually on my way back to the surface by like the 3rd or 4th one. Professional freedivers, from what I'm told, the ones that go super, super deep, they'll go through something like 40 or 50 contractions before, getting back, which is mind blowing because I'm like 5.
That's the other thing is, we talk about long breath hold, and even in the spearfishing world, I think, you know, kind of the legends, right? You hear about like, oh, he had like an 8-minute bottom time or, you know, something like that, which is insane. We're talking about the OGs way back in the day, and it's insane. But like the world record for breath hold underwater is like 18
Unassisted.
minutes.
Well, I know they're breathing
that's
gas and stuff too.
Well, yeah,
They're
but I mean,
cheating.
technically, the whole cheating thing is always kind of a caveat. But I mean, it's up there. It's
Not
not 4
cheating, yeah,
minutes.
I
It's
guess cheating
not
is the wrong word.
12. You know, it's quite a ways. So
And to put it in perspective, we're in BHA, California. So California hunting, you really don't need to be underwater for more than like a minute. You don't have to dive 100 feet if that's not necessary here. You can get all the fish, depending on the time of year, in 30 feet or less, or just about. There's some exceptions, obviously, but yeah, you don't have to aim for like these magnificent levels or pride points or whatever you're doing, because you can fish great fish all year round in less than 30 feet of water.
Mm-hmm. And with a few limited exceptions like Hawaii, and some
Hawaii's
tropical
hard,
locations where people are regularly diving, 100 feet, 115 feet, and hanging out on the bottom to bring fish in. Really, it's not something that's necessary to get into this sport. I think part of what makes spearfishing so much more accessible than competitive freediving is when you talk about competitive freediving, you're looking at people diving, 300, 400, 500 feet. The record for no limits, which is a crazy sled, you ride a weighted sled down to the bottom and then ride an air inflated bag back to the surface. The current world record for that is something north of 800 feet. Spearfishing, you're never going to need to go anywhere near that deep. Partly because something like 99% of the ocean's biomass exists within that first 100 meters of the surface.
So before we get into which, for many of, we're going to get into spear gear, and I'm sure a lot of you will be kind of like, okay, but we want this to be helpful to people that haven't dove as well, so just bear with us. But before we do that, Devin, how are we looking on answers?
Right. So we've got, let's see, 38% held their breath for a minute, 23% held their breath for a minute, 30 seconds, and 38% held it all the way till the end.
nice.
Or maybe
Nice.
someone's still holding. I don't know. The poll's still open. I will say we did get one more question. I'll throw this one to you guys to answer if you can now or whenever. But this one is, how important is it to attach your speared fish to your float rather than your body?
I'll take this one. It really depends. It really depends on a couple things, including how you're attaching it to your body and where you're diving. So if you're diving in a place like Florida or Hawaii that have like a lot of smaller reef sharks, you've got kind of the typical assortment of tropical sharks, right? Gray reef sharks, hammerheads, bull sharks, that sort of thing. You're generally not going to want to attach fish to your body. The sharks will come after you if you're spearing. They eat fish. They smell the blood. I have heard plenty of stories of guys who have attached fish to their body only to have a shark come up and swim away with it.
Or sea lion.
Or a sea lion. In California, with the exception of sea lions, you generally don't have to worry about that. If you're going to get hit by a shark, it's going to be too big to care about the fish that are on your belt. So particularly up here in Northern California, the common practice is to wear a belt stringer, which is a little, 6 to 8 inch piece of pointy steel with some heavy duty, like 400-pound monofilament or spectra or sometimes cable looped through it that is then attached to your body in some way. A lot of dive shops these days will sell little kits that kind of have that stringer attachment with a little holster for it and a little clip that clips onto your belt. I don't particularly like those because then the fish are just kind of floating off on your side. And up here, the type of hunting that we do, where we're going after lingcod and cabezon and rockfish, everything we're chasing for the most part is on the bottom. You have to get into holes, sometimes deep into holes. I know I don't personally do this because I don't trust myself to do it, but I know some divers who will find one cave and then go into it to find the other cave that's inside it, and then go into that to find the other cave that's inside that. And if you have 3 or 4 or 5 fish just kind of flopping around next to you that are not in your control, they're not tight to your body, it's very easy to get tangled. So what I actually do,
Okay, in my defense, I have body language for my dive buddy when we do this. If I do this with my flippers, it means come get me.
Yeah, you'll look down and all you'll see is Eric's flippers sticking out from underneath of a rock, and you're just like, is he okay? But 99% of the time he found a scallop. Yeah. And that's what he's going for. Yeah,
real quick. Well, one of the tricks I learned from some of the old school divers around here is to take a little loop of 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch bungee and put that on the side of one of your weights on your belt. And then you clip the tag end of your stringer's monofilament or spectre or cable or whatever to that bungee. And then your stringer goes through another loop on the other side of another weight somewhere on your back. So what happens is you end up with a stringer stretched kind of across here, right there, right on my butt. And that holds your fish nice and tight to your body. It's in line with you, so you don't have any drag issues when you're descending or ascending, and it's much less likely to get stuck in a hole. The one thing I will tell you is with toothy fish, halibut, lingcod, you want to make sure you do a loop through the bottom of the jaw and a loop right up out by their eyeballs, and make sure you loop that mouth shut, because they will bite you and it will not be pleasant.
And they're typically close to your crotch when they're on your belt. Not fun.
Yeah.
Just especially in California, like they said, we don't have a huge issue with like little sharks trying to take stuff off you. But yeah, I've run with a stringer on my belt. I've also run every once in a while. You shoot a fish, you go, oh, there's another fish, and I'll leave it. On our spear guns, there's a piece of mono that runs back to a latch, and I'll leave it on that, and I'll literally have it hanging from my gun. I know I've seen Charlie do the same thing, and I've done that, and then you look over and there's a sea lion just like staring at you, and it's kind of like looking at a pit bull and having like a kibble or like a milk bone tied to your leg, and you're just like, I gotta get back to my float. So it's one of those things that because our floats will end up sometimes hundreds of yards away from us, you do it. But at a certain point, yes, I think all of us end up trying to stash our fish from.
And it's a balance too. I mean, depending on where you dive in the state, up here, the sea lions tend not to be very aggressive. I've heard stories from LA and San Diego of white sea bass divers who will have a big, like 220-pound bull sea lion come up and literally wrestle them for a 50 or 60-pound fish. That doesn't happen here, so it's not something that we worry about. I will say, it would behoove you to learn the difference between a harbor seal, which is generally smaller and does not have ear flaps, they just have a little hole that goes into their head.
They're adorable.
And a sea lion, which is much bigger, has a little ear flap, and will come right at you. When I was in school down here, our dive safety officer at school was this fiery little 5-foot-tall British woman, and she liked to tell this story diving out at this beginner dive spot down the street from us, where she was teaching a class and a big 200+ pound bull sea lion came up and just started chewing on the top of her head. And she had no choice but to sit there for about 15 minutes until it was over.
I don't know. I've heard stories of sea lions hurting people's hips and stuff, pulling them off the stringer. So I try not to, as best as I can, keep fish on my body. I don't like it. And after we did that article, Ariella did that article with that shark expert in Hawaii. They gave this anecdote about human blood does not matter to sharks. They can smell it, but it doesn't excite them. It's kind of like potpourri to us. We can smell it, but it doesn't make us want a steak. But fish blood, on the other hand, can. And we do at certain times of the year have a ton of great whites here. And statistically speaking, I've only ever seen 2 in the water They were never on purpose. One of them was a blinking contest, which was really, really scary. I bought a shark shield directly after that.
And abandoned his buddy in the process.
He was there. I was out. I was yelling shark, so I feel like I did my duty.
Not yelling shark.
It's the same as bears, right? I don't have to run faster than the bear. I have to run faster than you. It's the same thing with
Yeah,
sharks. I
Get
just
to
have
the
to
beach
swim.
first and then
Yeah,
tell me about it.
exactly. I'll yell from the rocks, hey, there's a shark in there.
So
Uh-huh.
I don't like having my fish on me at all, just for like a numerical thing. I dive enough to where statistically something could happen, and I'd rather not.
So
Yeah,
do
I
we want to?
agree.
Oh, go ahead, Charlie. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna weigh in really quick. I always try to keep, if I have my float with me, I and it's close to me, I'll always put the fish on the float versus wearing them. The other reason I like to do that is because the fish can create drag when you're diving, especially if you have a lot or if you have big fish. Like I don't know if anyone has ever really tried to like swim around with a 20-pound lingcod on their belt, but like it's not that much fun, you know. So I'll immediately put a fish like that on my float. But yeah, I think it's best practice to keep it off yourself, even up in Northern California. But I'll certainly do it there, and I've even done it here in Baja on occasion. But I'm definitely much less comfortable here doing something like that than I would be in Northern California.
Well, we've got a lot to cover, so let's jump in. We're going to go over some safety stuff. We're going to go over especially food. I'm excited for that part. How to find fish, interacting with the environment. But I think it's best just to hop into a basic overview of gear. I'll punt.
Basic overview of gear. All right. So what do you need to get started spearfishing? You need fins, you need a mask, you need a snorkel, you need something pokey. That can be a spear gun, it can be a pole spear, which if you're on a tight budget and you just want to give spearfishing a shot and you're not sure that it's something that you're going to stick with, a pole spear is generally about 30-40 bucks. It comes with a little trident head on the top and a giant rubber band on the other end, and you just stretch that band up, choke up on the shaft, and let it go, and it goes poking into your fish. That can be a great way to get started. In California, the water is cold. It does not matter where you are. It does not matter.
Northern California.
No, all of California. It doesn't matter if you surf in boardies in San Diego. You're gonna want a wetsuit when you dive. If you're down south and you're diving mostly in San Diego, you can get away in your surf suit. Anywhere north of that, you're gonna want at least a scuba suit or a purpose-built freediving suit. The difference between the difference between a scuba suit and a purpose-built freediving suit is going to be in the construction. So scuba suits, you're spending a lot of time at depth. They're made of relatively dense neoprene because as you dive, right, all of the air in anything you dive with compresses. So in order to have that suit keep its shape and integrity and warmth over time, the less air you get in the neoprene of a scuba suit, the better off you're going to be. But less air also equates to less warmth. So freedive neoprene is generally less dense. It's got bigger air pockets in it, which makes it warmer and stretchier. The other thing is that freediving suits generally have raw neoprene on the inside. And what I mean by that is if you're at all familiar with scuba or surfing wetsuits, you'll notice like the lycra on the outside, right? Freediving suits, when you open them up, it's just raw neoprene. You have to lube up with hair conditioner or there's this company called Shark Snot that makes lube out of blended seaweed, KY jelly, whatever your preference is. Get in there, get all lubey and slippery, slide this on, you will be grateful you did. Wetsuits are great because they keep you warm, but because there's so much air in there, they're also very buoyant, which means you're going to need a weight belt and lead weights to offset that buoyancy and make yourself neutrally buoyant. Ideally around 30 feet of depth so that you float on the surface. The deeper you go, your buoyancy changes first to neutrally buoyant and then to negatively buoyant. Depending on how deep you're actually diving, you can putz with that 30-foot number a bit. But that's kind of the rule of thumb for proper safe wading.
Can I throw something in about wetsuits?
Please do.
So one of the ways that I got started, and again, going back to abalone divers and also people who might have started scuba diving or have been scuba diving, or even, hey, you go to a dive shop and this is all they have to rent. Don't shy away from going out in a scuba suit. It's how a lot of us started. They're lined. They're actually a little easier to get in and out of. They will come with the zipper. And there's this, again, spearfishing and freediving has kind of, they start meshing together. And sometimes people will tell you, no, you need an open cell. You don't. And I would rather see you get in the water and try it before spending a bunch of money on an expensive open cell when you can rent a 7 mil, depending on, you ask your dive shop where you're going, what they recommend. But again, if all you have is access to a scuba suit, don't shy away from that. That's it's still a great suit. It will still keep you warm, and you'll
I
still
got
have
a
a good time.
hand-me-down suit that I'm 6'3", and this was built for a guy that had to have been like 5'5". And I forced myself into this garbage scuba suit that had to have been like, 15, 20 years old. And then I put on little jet fins, which are like this big, and freedive fins are like this big. And that's how I started. And I used to take pictures with like perch on the end of my $30 little, here's the difference. Well, mine were even shorter than that. They're called jet fins. But that's how I got started. And I had my little 3-prong, and I thought I was the coolest dude on the world when I was able to go down 20 feet and get this little perch on the end of the pole. But you don't need all the high-end gear until you get in.
Yeah, I will say you can spend a ton of money on freediving and spearfishing equipment. You don't need to. If you're new to this sport, you want to get started, and you've got a limited budget and you're not sure where to spend your money on a wetsuit. That comfort as you learn what you're doing is going to be worth its weight in gold. You can dive in body surfing fins. You can dive in your grandpa's like 40-year-old mask. You don't even theoretically need a snorkel, although I'd highly recommend you have one.
Use a snorkel.
Yeah. But that wetsuit, that comfort, and the safety that comes with the comfort, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute here, is really critical to learning and kind of perfecting those skills.
And just getting back to, again, gear, when you go into a shop, the other kind of big selection, other than guns, which we'll get into, the big wearable selection are going to be fins. Again, you can dive in small fins, you can dive in scuba fins. One of the things that most people, and now they're starting to sell kind of free dive packages, they're going to start out and they're going to sell these, which are plastic free dive fins. Now, these definitely have a variance in what works, but if you go with like a Rife or an Omer or a name brand, which doesn't take long to kind of learn, they're going to be good fins. And I know OG Spiros that are killing massive fish
Diving
and
100
having
feet deep in plastics.
and plastic fins. Yeah, I'm a nerd. I spent way too much money on my fins, and trust me, I still can't keep up with them. So,
and one thing that spearfishing companies have done right, thankfully, is if you'll notice on the fins Ryan just held up, they're technically two pieces. There's the foot pocket, that's like the shoe your foot actually goes into, and then there's the blade that does all the work for you.
Here, flip it over.
yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
attached by a couple screws.
So there's like a really base level of plastic freediving fins that are all one piece. And then if you spend like, 15, 20 bucks more, you can generally get like a 2-piece equivalent of that fin. If you think this is a sport you're going to be sticking with or might stick with, highly recommend going 2-piece. As you grow, as you decide what gear you like and maybe have some more money to spend on other gear, you can take those plastic blades out and stick fiberglass or carbon fiber fin blades in your original foot pockets. You'll have fins that fit the same for a lot less money than buying a whole new set of blades and foot pockets.
Which are like 150.
And you'll have a huge jump in performance as you do that.
The foot pockets.
Yeah.
Devin, I just noticed you did a little bit of a magic trick. Your hands went off screen, and when they came back, they had a beer. How'd you do that?
That is thanks to my lovely wife right there. I do want to weigh in on the gear. Personally, most of the time I spearfish in the same suit that I surf in a 4.3 with a hood. I do have a dive suit that I've gotten stuck in a couple times because it was a hand-me-down from a friend that is a little too small. But I'll also say that in college, you know, I had like crappy wetsuit, pole spear, crappy fins, no weight belt, and I was still able to feed myself and other poor college students for a long time. So, you know, shot perch then, I'll shoot them now proudly, throw them on the smoker. Yeah, I think there's so many levels to get to it, but I think honestly, if you just want to get into it and you want to try it out, you really don't have to spend a lot of money, and you can see if you like it, and then you can go down the rabbit hole. But
on that note, if you want to try it out, you haven't started yet, or you may have tried to go out once and just gear that didn't fit or something, go to a dive shop first, make sure they rent decent free dive gear. You're going to spend, I don't know, probably $35-$40 to rent some gear for the day. And then second to that is the whole mentorship aspect. I think we live in an age right now where you want to go on Facebook and ask a question and get an easy answer. Where's the best place to dive? Like, you're never going to get the best place to dive or someone's best place to dive, hopefully, on Facebook. And we would encourage you not to share places, dive spots publicly, privately, however you want to do it. But without getting too far into the ethics of it, try to find someone that will take you diving. I can't tell you how much I read and studied. And then when my free dive knife broke, I couldn't figure out how to fix it. And then I asked a dumb question as a newbie and got people that were just like, what, are you, an idiot? You don't know how to fix and do a little thing like this. And so find someone that's willing to be like, hey, I'll take you out. The way Ryan did that, or I've had other people, one of my best buddies now in the area, dive buddies, he's like, hey, I'll take you to tacos if you take me diving. I was like, yeah, tacos are a great way to get someone enticed to take you diving. And most people are generally happy to do that. So before you go invest a bunch of money in gear, find someone that has some good experience, that's safety oriented, that's not going to be like, go dive that kelp by yourself, you've never been in the water. You know, make sure they're really conscientious about your abilities. And then do what it takes to dive with them and learn from them. And I think that is you're gonna learn so much more than you would from 1,000 different opinions on forums or social media sites or anything like that.
100%. And divers are a lot like hunters, and that if you ask them where to go, they're not going to tell you. But I guarantee you they'll be very excited to take you there. Because there's nothing more fun than watching someone shoot their first fish.
Charlie, do you have any weigh in on that? Sorry, we keep just like, we're all in the same room. It's easier for us to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'd have a couple things that I would point out. Just we might be backtracking a tad bit, but just when weight belts were mentioned, one thing I would add, especially for anybody who's beginner crowd, part of the beginners here, don't fall into the trap of overweighting yourself, thinking that you're going to get down to the bottom better or dive better. I feel like a lot of beginners and even like experienced divers, especially in Northern California, are wearing way too much weight on their belt. And it's extremely unsafe practice for like a multitude of reasons. But you know, that 30-foot rule that Andrew mentioned is a pretty good way to measure. Even if you can't dive 30 feet, you can basically play with the weight in a pool or in the ocean, and you know, just make sure that when you do an exhale, that you're still floating up to like your collarbone and your head is out of the water. That's the key. If you're sinking when you're on the surface and you have to like kick forward to stay afloat, you're wearing way too much weight.
Just to expand on what you said, put some weight on, preferably have a boogie board or something, a kayak that you can put additional weight on. Hop in the water, mask on, exhale fully with your weights on. And if you sink below your collarbones as a beginner, like, you don't want to sink below on an exhale. So that would be like, and then if you're totally way buoyant, maybe add a pound and then try it again. Just that's generally accepted as one of the ways outside of diving with an instructor, taking a course, figuring out what works best for you. That's kind of like the do-it-yourself.
And to wrap that all back together, again, if you go out with a buddy who's knowledgeable and at least has been out there with a couple different people, you can look at someone and go, hey, you're overweighted. And because I can just tell by the way they're struggling at the surface, or even, hey, you're underweighted because I can tell you're bobbing up to your chest and you're going to have a hard time diving. They'll save you. One of the things that my cousin, one of the people I learned to dive with, my mask was just filling full of water. It was fogging. And I'm like, this sucks. I can't do this. This is terrible. I was just getting frustrated. And he just simply reached over and pulled my hood back from inside my goggles. And it was just on the edge, but it saved my whole trip because I probably would have gotten frustrated and swam back in. And it's one of those things that when you go with somebody who knows what might ruin your trip, they can really help make sure you have a fun time in the water. So I did want to throw in there that one of the ways I got started, we are lucky enough to have the Monterey Bay Tritons as a club in our area. If you're in SoCal, there are plenty of clubs down there. And I think there's a couple up north as well, even all the way into Oregon. You can find these clubs, and going to a meet in person, just, chatting it up with a couple of the older guys, you're going to learn a lot of information, and you're going to find more of those people who are like, oh yeah, man, come out fishing with me. That's going to be one of the best ways, other than just being on Facebook and going, hey, I need this, or, it still works, but being in person is obviously a great way to do that. So look into your local dive club.
Yep. Good call.
Just speaking to that also, going out with other people, even when you're buying equipment and figuring out what to get, a lot of again, the temptation this day and age is to go on Facebook or go on forums and do research on the internet, which is all great. Educating yourself is fantastic in any sport, but there can definitely be the temptation to like overanalyze and agonize over like which spear gun you should get, and like should it be a roller spear gun, and like the problem with doing it on the internet is there's 1,000 opinions and they're all right, or they're all wrong, depending on which way you want to look at it. But if you have mentors, if you have people that are experienced that can guide you, you're going to get the right answer, and you're going to be comfortable with it, versus just running around like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to figure out gear, and then buying things that you don't need and having to get rid of them, etc. So yeah.
Let's talk about guns.
Safety.
Gun safety.
We didn't talk about guns.
We'll talk about guns in safety.
Okay. It's the most fun part.
So
You're
excited.
skipping over it. I'm so sad.
He got a tuna gun like 20 minutes ago.
I know.
Go for it.
You want to talk about?
Okay, so
Marauders?
yeah, let's just talk
So
about guns in
excited right
general. Again, most of the things that people start out with, and the reason I went and grabbed the oversized tuna gun from the shelf is because I saw Devin grab a pole spear, and that is a fiberglass 3-prong. You can find it in almost any shop ever, and that's what most of us start out with. And most of us have shot fish with it. It's not easy. And it is just one of those things that, again, most people come across. They're cheap, and I would not tell anyone not to buy one. As you move up in the spearfishing world, you are going to come across a myriad of gun craziness and people who tell you what is best and what is not. Really, and especially for like what we're doing, a simple pole gun, a Rob Allen is a great gun. Then you can start moving up, and 1 band will work. 2 bands is great. I would suggest not, and I mean, when you go to dive shops, they'll rent them to you. I would suggest not using the attachment that has like the old phone cords, or it looks like this on it. You want to use something that has mono and is wrapped at least once. That's going to hold up much better. But we can kind of go through the different sizes here, and hopefully one of the things that I want to keep you guys from doing is being sold a gun that you cannot use, because if you're hole hunting and someone sells you a 110, it is going to be absolutely worthless. So
to that point, the fun part about buying spear guns is that everyone acts as if they're standardized, and they are not. This is a spear gun.
Not actually aimed right at Ryan.
Not actually aimed at Ryan. You'll see spear guns measured 2 ways. The first is the whole length of the gun, which I personally think is really freaking annoying. A lot of old school custom American spear gun builders will measure that way. Some of the old school mass-produced American spear guns, like AV Billers, are measured that way. The much more common thing in the rest of the world, and increasingly in the US, is to measure from the holes where the bands are to where the trigger mechanism is in the stock. And what that measurement tells you is essentially how far these bands are going to stretch, how much power you're going to have when you do eventually pull that trigger. If you're diving in Northern California, northern being Point Conception to the Oregon border, anything that measures here to here, 70 to 90 centimeters, will do the trick just fine for you. If you're diving south of Point Conception, you're going to want a longer gun, partly because the visibility is better, partly because as you grow in your diving experience, you're going to have the opportunity to shoot inshore pelagic fish like yellowtail and white sea bass that just get big. And the bigger the fish is, the more punch you need to get through them. So something in the 110 to 120 range will serve you pretty well.
So you want to grab that smaller.
I'll jump in on that real quick too, because it really depends on what you're going after too. There's plenty of reef south of Point Conception that you may not want a really big gun, especially if you're just starting out and you don't want to go out pretty far and you want to stick to kind of like nearshore reef fish and just kind of get your bearing. I would not recommend getting a really large gun because it's going to be really unruly in the water, and you're probably just going to blast it into a rock and not be really stoked on that. But you're absolutely right. Like if your goal is to go after some of those larger pelagic game fish like yellowtail and white sea bass and some of the cool stuff that we do have running through here, then yeah, I would absolutely go with your recommendation and go for a longer gun, because you're going to want that power.
So this gun, this gun here is a Rife, which is a really nice gun. This isn't a beginner gun. Really what we're using this for is size. I mean, as you can see, I can maneuver it one-handed. If there was a hole that I need to get down, it's not going to be even hard to shoot almost from the hip. You're going to be able to point it around and really get it in small spaces where you need to be.
There's a lot of experienced spearfishermen that'll say a 60 centimeter gun is all you need for Northern California.
I would love to take this gun anywhere. What he's holding behind me is a gun they use for shooting bluefin tuna.
That's actually small for that. That's not even that.
It'll take a tuna.
It will take a tuna, but the guys that use the surfboards that are quite a bit longer than that still.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that's going to be kind of where you start on guns, knowing the size that you need. And please don't go into a dive shop. I mean, we're really blessed to have Bamboo Reef because they have started to kind of get their idea, a really good, well-trained staff that knows what they're talking about and what you'll need out here. Some shops you go into and they'll try to sell you a 110 for hole hunting just because it's what they have on the shelf. And they may only have 2 guns on the shelf. And honestly, walk out. If it's not the right gun for what you're doing, you're going to have a miserable time. You're going to waste, any respectable spear gun, you're spending over $150. So it's not a cheap item. And yeah, we just want to make sure that, you kind of get that idea. Hey, I don't want to buy anything over 90. And because it can be a pain.
You can deep dive really, really, really far into specifics on gear. It's kind of hard to just say this is the best gun for this area. If you did want to learn a lot more about the differences between plastic fins and fiberglass fins and carbon fiber fins, or gun sizes, or the way that they're oriented, we have a lot of that stuff on our website at finandforage.com. But because we still have a lot to cover, I think we should probably move on to getting into the safety side of stuff. So if you have more gear questions, shoot them up in the chat or the Q&A, or send us a message on social media or something like that, and we'll be sure to get to that. But safety is a really, really important thing. It's more important than anything else. This is a sport that is a lot more dangerous if you're not educated and you're not doing things in a safe manner. So there's a lot to talk about on that.
There is, and I'm going to keep it uncomfortably short for how important it is. If there are 2 things that you take away from this talk, they are: take a freediving class and slow is fast. Those are the two most important things for you to remember. The things that are going to get you in trouble spearfishing are mostly things you're not going to be watching out for. You know, like a lot of people, when I tell them I spearfish who have no experience in the ocean, the first thing they ask about is sharks. Sharks are around, they are a thing. People get bit. It's really rare. You know, up here where we dive, we all mostly carry tourniquets and trauma kits to
Ouch,
deal
ouch.
with first aid issues. We know how to apply them. The reality is, I'm probably never going to need the tourniquet that I carry on my leg or the one that I carry on my kayak. What I'm going to need to know how to do is rescue my buddy who blacks out, or help my buddy navigate a sketchy situation that we did not intend to get ourselves in. That we ended up in accidentally.
It doesn't have to be gnarly. Like I had a guy go into sheer panic just by getting into the water. He was in like 8 feet of water and he couldn't think straight, and he was clearly freaking out. And so those are the situations where you need to know how to respond, what to do, rip the weight belt off, and get him safe as soon as possible.
The very first story that I told when we opened up here about Eric's buddy puking on me. When we first kicked out into the water, my friend Dan, the reason he lost all his gear was because he got wrapped up worse than I've ever seen anyone get wrapped up in really fine but really strong kelp. Part of the reason you wear a wetsuit spearfishing is because the wetsuit gives you added buoyancy. Yes, it's annoying that you have to wear weights to offset that so that you can dive efficiently. But the added benefit is that if you get into a sketchy situation underwater and you yank that belt off, you're going to float. That wetsuit's going to make sure that you float. So if you ever end up in a situation in the water where you're uncomfortable, first two things you do are take a deep breath, either literally if you're on top of the water or metaphorically if you're underwater, and drop your weight belt. You're going to float. You're going to have time to take stock of your situation and make sure that you are safe.
We also had a question come in that says, any thoughts on diving alone once you have a bit of experience? And we just launched a podcast recently with a guy named Big Jake Lords that Ryan interviewed, and I think he has a pretty good answer for that.
So I completely understand, and I mean it's really hard because I understand why people dive alone. You don't have a buddy that's willing to go out with you or can go out with you at that time. You're just trying to get a quick dive in, maybe some fish after work. And a lot of people say, I know my limits. And again, we put a link up in the show notes here, or whatever we call them. That's immersion free diving. And that is Ted Hardy. He's a world championship free diver. And he has said multiple times that is complete crap. And I can tell you that because it's not you going down and sitting on the bottom and going, oh, I'm going to swim back up. It's the time you go down and you get snagged on something and have to pull yourself free. It's the time you go down and shoot a fish and your spear goes into a rock and you have to struggle to get that thing free. And instead of leaving your gun and going to the surface, you may not think, because your brain can't keep track of time well at all, especially when you're multitasking. And people have died holding a spear stuck in a rock with a fish on the end of it. And it's just because they do not realize how long they've been down there. I was just listening to a story about that the other week. I don't know who it was, but I mean, it was a very strong swimmer and very experienced freediver that went down and did the same exact thing. And he had swam away from his buddies. He was out there with friends, and they kind of looked over and went, he hasn't been to the surface in a while. And they found him dead on the floor. And it is, I mean, he knew his limits. He just stayed there longer. And it's a terrible thing. And it's not only bad for obviously all of your loved ones and everyone you're leaving behind, but it's also very bad for the community, because it's the same thing as like when a hunter goes out and gets a little drunk because, hey, I'm just having a couple beers, and shoots another hunter because he thinks it's a deer. Like, no, is that any of us? I hope not. But at the same time, when that shows up in the newspaper and everybody hears about it, especially your wife at home that is going to watch you go out hunting and think about somebody shooting you because they're drunk, it's a terrible look on the community. So I understand, and it's really hard, but we always ask, get a good dive buddy. If you don't have one, train one. With Jake, he lives in Utah and he dives high freshwater lakes. It's a great podcast. Go listen to it. But he's like, nobody spearfishes or free dives in Utah, but he has taken the time, and now I think he has like 12 people. He has 3 extra sets of gear in his garage because he gets people, he trains them, he takes them out, and that way he has a dive buddy. So it takes a little bit of effort, but please do not dive alone.
Yep, those are a couple of really good points. If you don't have a buddy, make a buddy. I guarantee you one of your friends somewhere out there wants to learn how to spearfish. I'll also add 2 different points. The first is that it's a lot easier to push your limits once you know what your limits are without even realizing that you're doing it. And sometimes shit just happens. I remember I took a buddy out diving in LA once, like squarely within my limits. He was a longtime scuba diver, but had never really free dove before. By this point, I had been free diving for probably 6 years. I was advanced scuba certified, rescue diver certified, like thought I knew what I was doing. And we were out and I was poking around some holes looking for sheephead. And I found this cave that looked really promising, and I crawled into it about 35 feet below the surface and went in, just past my waist. And when I went into the cave, what I saw was a lot of the same kind of understory kelp sloshing back and forth that we get up here all the time. When I went to back my way out of the cave, I was stuck. Apparently, one of those pieces of understory kelp was actually 3 10-pound scuba weights that had an anchor chain on them and a little, fist-sized crab float that someone had been using to anchor a boat. And that got tangled up somewhere on my gear. I couldn't feel it. Couldn't quite figure out where it was. And I remember feeling really proud of myself in that moment. Like, hey, I've got a decent breath hold. I can handle the situation. And I didn't take my weight belt off. And in hindsight, that was the stupidest thing I could have done in that moment. Like, had I just taken my belt off and said, screw it, and sent my buddy back down to get it later, like, it would have been an easy, haha, that was weird story. Instead, I sat there on the bottom, fiddling with my gear until I was like at the ragged edge of my breath hold. And had my buddy not been there on the surface, like that could have really easily turned into a sketchy, like I could have died. It's really easy to push your limits once you know what your limits are because it feels comfortable. And if you read stories about people who die spearfishing, so much of the time it is divers who are incredibly competent who can go down and hit 115, 120 feet and hang down there for a minute or a minute and a half. And when they die, they're not diving 120 feet, they're diving 30 feet. And they're just bouncing up and down to the bottom because it's like nothing to them. And it's when you get comfortable and lose sight of the things that can go wrong because you feel like either they're not going to happen to you or like you can handle yourself if they do happen, that's when stuff starts to go wrong.
Or there's stuff that's not even on your radar. Maybe you drank the night before and you're dehydrated and you don't know that your breath hold isn't as good, or your oxygen, your ability to absorb oxygen, or however it works. Yeah, there's a lot that can go into it.
So the other thing, and I just thought it goes kind of hand in hand with gear and safety. If you're diving in SoCal or a blue water hunter, this has a whole different meaning to you. But for us guys up here in NorCal, we have terrible viz and kelp. And so you may say, okay, I go out with a dive buddy. The minute he gets down past 10 feet, I can't see him anymore. So what we run is a float line, usually a high vis, white or yellow. And what this does is, this is 50 feet. They come in, 75, 100 feet, that sort of thing. And if Andrew goes down, I can't see him anymore, I can follow this. If for some reason he's been down there a lot longer, let's say he gets stuck in that hole that he was talking about, and I can't see him, I can follow this. And this will float on the surface. It floats up top and I just follow it down. Sometimes you can even give it a little tug if you want to. And this is another thing that when you're new, these things are so annoying. They get hooked on everything. Your buddies hate them. But once you learn how to manage them, they are a huge, huge help. And I mean, I've seen aerial footage of divers. You see these things from the air. If you were being looked for by Coast Guard, anything like that, these are going to be a huge sign of where you are. So another thing that you might want to invest in almost right off the bat, it's called a float line. You hook it to the end of your gun. And quick tip, it's also really great if you want to mark holes. You can leave your gun down on the bottom, go up, get that breath of air, take your time, relax, go down and shoot that fish. So these are great.
That's actually a really good point to feed into the second point that I wanted to make, which is just because you have a buddy in the water does not mean you're diving with a buddy. One of the top killers of free divers and spear fishermen is something called shallow water blackout. And the reason it's called shallow water blackout is it typically happens on ascent within that last, 15 feet to the surface. There's a lot of kind of complex gas chemistry that goes into why it happens. The short answer is that, as you're diving, you're using up that oxygen that's in your lungs. The partial pressures of the gases in your lungs are changing. And when you ascend, right, in the same way that when you're scuba diving and you ascend too quickly, you end up with gases kind of coming out of, your blood cells and bubbling up inside of you. Your lungs are depleted of oxygen. Your blood has a lot of oxygen in it because you're actively using it. And as you ascend, those partial pressures want to equalize. And it will actually suck suck oxygen out of critical places like your brain where you need it to stay conscious, like opening a soda can or a beer. And you get that rush of gas. That rush of gas leaves your blood, leaves your brain, and you lose consciousness. And if that happens as you're approaching the surface and you haven't quite become positively buoyant yet, or if that happens and you end up on the surface face down, or if, as Charlie mentioned earlier, you're overweighted, you can drown and have no idea it ever happened. So the only way to really avoid that is to have a buddy there who can hold you, who can make sure you regain consciousness, who knows how to handle that situation competently and calmly. And if they are 30 yards across a kelp bed from you, that's not going to happen. They have to be there with you, next to you when you ascend.
So before we move on to a little bit of a lighter topic where Charlie's going to walk us through interacting with your environment and how to find fish, I just have one last safety story to share. And it's not quite about getting hooked on an anchor at 35 feet, which is so sketchy. It's about the education side of freediving, where it's knowing how to gauge conditions, knowing which direction the major swell is coming in from, how to be prepared for it, how to know when to say no to the dive. So for instance, my good buddy and I go way south into a very remote area. It's a cove I had recently found, and we go to look at how the conditions are interacting with that cove, and there's this just massive waves coming in, like overhead surfing waves easily. There was and it's a far swim, so we didn't really want to have to fight through all of those to get out to the spot we had planned on diving. So the south part of the cove kind of was a little bit of a peninsula, and we said, hey, let's go find a little goat trail and see if we can't come down the backside and get in an area that's a little more protected. So this backside over here, we found an area that had recently been a landslide. That should have been our first indicator not to dive it, but we were like, cool, we can get down on this soft soil of this landslide. So we hiked down, and kind of right at this point of the southern cove, there's this big rock, maybe 20 feet tall. There's someone literally, okay, sorry. People tapping on the glass of the dive shop. So there's this big rock, maybe 20 feet tall, and there's waves coming up and slapping it and kind of crashing. We're like, okay, that's fine. It was a pretty easy entry. And so we get in and we proceed to hunt for like 5.5 hours or something like that. Got amazing fish. And actually one of them ended up being a state record that at the time I didn't know how to apply, so I didn't get the state record, but it was a big fish. It was fun. But on the way out, I'm carrying really heavy board full of fish. We're deciding to come back to where we got in at and see that now that 20-foot tall rock that had waves crashing up against it now had them crashing over it. And we're like, there's no way we can get into shore where we got in the first place. So we were like, okay, we time the swell, we wait for the windows of the waves to pass, and he goes in first, I keep his board, and then he gets in, takes his fins off and everything. I throw the board to him, and it's really hairy situation. There was no sand on this exit. It was like hard rocks and barnacles and stuff that could make you say ouch. And then he gets his board, and then I go to kick my board in, and this wave catches me and just hucks me into a rock, and I had this nasty huge bruise on my side for a while. And then we are forced at this only place we could exit to rock climb up, kind of scramble up this thing for probably like 100 feet or so, and we ended at a field of poison oak. And there's no other option than to hike through the poison oak. And we got back to the trail, and I was stupid. And well, that whole thing was stupid, but I was stupid again and didn't wash my wetsuit after that. And I dove in this local tournament the next day and didn't wash my gear and put it all back on, and then ended up in the urgent care 3 days later getting shots because I had poison oak literally everywhere. But anyways, all that's to say, like, there's a lot of different ways to be unsafe. And in that last story, it was basically we just said yes when we should have said no. We didn't pay attention to the conditions well enough. Didn't notice that the swell was building throughout the day, and that could have been really, really bad.
And
So-
one last point on that Ryan likes to call Sacramento syndrome.
Sacramento fever. Yeah.
California is a big place. A lot of us don't live as close to the ocean as we would like to. I drove 2.5 hours to be here today.
I drove 2.5 minutes.
I hate you. And most of that, like anytime I want to dive, I'm in the car for at least an hour and a half. It's really tempting when you roll up on a site to look at it, and it's a little bit sketchier than you hoped it would be. And you just say, you know what, like, I'm not going to be a candy ass today. I can take it. Don't do that. Resist the urge to do that. That is how people get in trouble. It's why back when abalone was open for take, so many people every year would die. The Sonoma County Sheriff's Department helicopter would be flying constantly overhead because people would get into situations they couldn't get themselves out of, just because they drove 3 hours to be there at 7 a.m.
So that's a story I tell because I have firsthand experience with that. We got to a spot up in Gualda early. Water was fine. Got in, dove for 4 hours, got our limits, walked out, and the getting back in was actually pretty sketchy. Wasn't super sketchy, wasn't life threatening, but you could tell that it had obviously been building through the day. And to keep it short, we passed some guys going down on a trail. And they said, hey, how is it out there? And we said, hey, it's getting a little rough. You might want to rethink it. And by the time we had our wetsuits off and everything loaded up, one of those guys was dead. And he didn't make it home that day. And so, you could tell they kind of laughed us off as we were getting in the truck. And it's a horrible story. And it's terrible to see the people who care about them on shore. It's terrible to hear the buddy cry for help. And it'd be really terrible if it was you. So have a beer, sit on the beach. Our beaches are 100% beautiful. And if they're not beautiful enough to sit on the beach and have a beer, you definitely shouldn't be there. So go home and enjoy, being safe. And the abalone, if it ever opens again, will be there. The fish will be there, and you can dive another day.
So we've got about 25 minutes left. We want to make sure we have adequate time to answer your any questions you have. I'd love to hear from Charlie, who is just a stellar diver, excellent hunter. He's got some really, really impressive fish throughout his time in the water. And it would be fun to hear from you, Charlie, some of your wisdom on what does it take to interact with the environment? What does it take to interact with fish? What would make you, some tips for beginners on how to find fish maybe? And then I'd still really love to breach the food topic because love food.
Might have to
but-
be
yeah, we
another
could-
day. And if you have questions,
Yeah, that's
please,
what
while
we're
Charlie's
all
talking,
about.
yeah, if Charlie's talking, please file in those questions so that when we get to them, we can kind of break them down and hopefully give you guys some good time on answering anything you got. Charlie, it's your turn.
All right. Well, without going, I think way too far in depth. I think, well, when we're talking about locating fish or just how to find fish, it sort of, you break that into two parts, right? The first is understanding the fish in the environment. And the other part is, locating areas where there's going to be fish. So some of that is like work that you can do beforehand. That involves, getting mentors and buddies, having people that can share areas with you, but it doesn't always have to. I think a really big part of the instinct of being a hunter, being a diver, is the adventure of exploring and finding spots that are off the beaten path, that don't have people pointing to them on web forums and on Facebook posts and stuff like that. Of course, when you're new, you're probably going to want to go to places that are safe, that are well known, and you're probably going to want to go with people. So I would definitely advise, like learning from other people at first. But yeah, when you start to get some experience and you want to find some new places, then using resources like Google Earth, looking at satellite imagery, things like that can give you some really good clues on places to go. Also, things like bottom contour maps, boating navigation charts. I have a Navionics app on my phone that I use all the time down here in Baja to try to figure out different depths and structures and stuff like that. So there's a lot of ways that you can find places to dive. And I'll leave that to you guys to discover. The second part is really like how do we go about finding the fish when we're in the water? And really, when it comes down to any predatory fish, at least, and most fish in general, it's all about a couple things. The first being structure. Fish love structure and also current. Most fish in the ocean, at least, are interacting with the current in some way. Basically, if you have stationary water, you don't have a very active biodiverse area. You want to be looking for areas that have even just a slight current passing them, and that's typically places that where the ocean has structure. The structure is typically what's creating the current. So that could be a point or a cove. That could be a mound of rocks on the bottom in a flat area. It could be a drop off where the water goes from shallow to deep. It could be a number of different things, but that's what we're talking about when we're talking about structure. And oftentimes that's going to coincide really well with current. Current also has to do with things like tides and the moon and all kinds of crazy factors that I don't even really understand. But it also doesn't have to be like a ripping fast current like you'd find in a river. Just a little bit of current that's moving things along is enough to create like an upwelling of life. Gets the microorganisms active. Gets the water temperatures at different depths mixing, gets the nutrients moving in the ecosystem, the bait fish active, and the predators come. So you're always looking for current. Now, like in Northern California, for example, when we're talking about structure, a lot of what we're doing is hole hunting. So not only are we looking for like rocky structures, we're also looking for like piles of rocks or lots of rocky areas with intricate openings and caves, and basically little tiny holes and places that we can go down to the bottom and look into, where the fish that we're looking for are going to hide. And we call that hole hunting. Basically, the more of that type of structure an area has, the more likely you're going to find some good stuff there. If you're trying to find lingcod and cabezon, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to pull up to a flat sandy beach where people surf and look out there. You're just not going to find those types of fish there. Now, depending on what type of fish you're looking for, you might find something. Halibut and striped bass, for example, love wavy sandy beaches. And so go, be my guest, go out there and look for halibut. But you want to understand what the fish that you're looking for are going to prefer in terms of habitat and environment. Now, like for example, here in Baja, when we're talking about structure, a lot of times we are looking for something like a deep drop off where the water goes from deep to deeper, or a underwater rock pile or mountain or something like that, where it's super deep everywhere else, and all of a sudden the water juts up, or the bottom juts up, out of hundreds of feet deep to 60 feet or 40 feet or something like that. And an area like that with like a constant current washing over it is just like full of life. There's going to be all kinds of fish there. So always be looking for structure. And when you're looking at, something like Google Maps, good places to look for would be, areas where there's points or coves. I mentioned that before. The other thing you can always do is look at the shoreline in an area. If the shoreline is steep and rocky and full of boulders and things like that, odds are that's going to continue down onto the bottom. If the shoreline's really shallow and flat and sandy, and it's just sloping in like that, odds are that is what you're going to see into the bottom. And to some extent, even like large structures on land will jut out. So oftentimes when you look at, say, a point, for example, you can see that point is coming from, like an arm off a mountain or something, and that the land is higher coming off of dry land all the way out and reaching out into the ocean. And that's why there's that ridge and that point that's going to attract the fish. Yes. So yeah, is there anything about locating fish or anything that you guys want to weigh in on here? Or?
In California, I'd just say my general rule of thumb is look for structure on the shoreline, look for kelp in the water. Once you're in the water, swim around until you start seeing fish in the midwater column, and then hunt below them. It's really simple. And I think generally speaking, that's going to be your best bet for being productive from anywhere from really southern central California all the way up to Alaska.
So the other thing that I want to add to that, it is, again, you're looking for structure, and it triggered this because Charlie's like, oh, you can see it off the shore. And I've looked at a million places that I'm like, oh, that would hold fish. But in California, our public waters are a lot like public lands where there is amazing habitat. I've walked in many a park where I'm like, oh, there's turkeys all over this place, but they just won't let you shoot them. so you have to look for the MPAs. Well, but it's real. And we're coming on 30 by 30. Devin knows a lot about that. We're talking about that kind of stuff. And the other thing I don't want to see is somebody going, oh, that would hold fish, and not even realizing that there are restrictions in areas that you can't shoot fish. And even if you can shoot fish, you can't take scallops. So please learn. And we have some information on our website that will kind of show you how to navigate that. And it's just worth looking into, because it's one of those things where if you get in trouble, it's a lot of trouble. And wardens really don't take as everyone knows, hunters and fishermen, wardens don't take the, oh, I didn't know, as a viable excuse, because they've heard that before from people who might have known. So please take your time and just make sure where you're going, it's legal to do so.
Cool. Oh, go ahead, Charlie.
Oh no, are we out of time here?
We're not out. We're just low.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, we can always do a part two, because I know there's a ton of really, really good stuff to cover just on the MPA and the conservation and identification. I'll just say super quickly, understanding species and size limits and what you're shooting is really, I can't stress that enough. And if you're not sure, don't shoot it. I'll also say that sometimes you can be in 5 feet of water and see giant fish. So
absolutely,
it really depends on where you're at. The first yellowtail I shot was in 8 feet of water, 20 feet from the shore on my way in. So it's never over until you're done. And yeah, I would just say, but again, know the regulations, know where you're diving, know where you're hunting, and just make sure you everything looks bigger underwater. So make sure it's just well over the size limit that you're aware of.
That's a very good point. For anyone who is not a snorkeler or scuba diver to begin with, always forget whether it's 25% or 30% bigger that fish look when they are underwater. I am very guilty of this, thankfully, with fish that do not have size limits. Generally, rockfish. Eric knows me well for this. If I don't dive for 3 or 4 months in a row and get in the water, the first fish I shoot will always end up like yay big. They look deceptively big underwater. So if you've got a fish with a size limit, white sea bass, lingcod, cabezon, greenling, a couple others, it would behoove you to, on some piece of gear that you're taking out with you, mark out in inches, like draw a ruler for yourself. And when you have the opportunity, set that gun down, swim away from it, and look at what that size looks like to you underwater. And you'll get a very clear sense very quickly of just how much bigger things look.
Nice.
Definitely. Ooh, got a question.
I'll add one thing to that
that's a good question.
with the size of the fish, because this also has to do with fish behavior, which Eric had asked me to touch on. But with any fish, this doesn't work very well for solitary fish, but with any fish that it travels in a group or a school, regardless of the size, you will almost always see the small ones first. And if you're patient and calm, not only will you shoot more fish if you're patient and calm and you're not being aggressive and coming at them, but if you go down to the bottom and you calm down and you just chill and you watch what's happening around you, and like the little rockfish or the little snapper or whatever you're hunting comes up, ignore that one. Don't shoot it just because it's the first fish you see, because inevitably, if you just let that one pass and wait a couple 10 more seconds, the big one's going to come right in behind it. Wherever you see small fish of a species, odds are there's some big ones around, and oftentimes you just shoot the small one and you've scared the big one off. So wait 10 more seconds and look for the big one. Look through the small ones.
Yep.
Very good advice.
Yep.
All right. We just got a question. Why is wearing a knife important, and where's the best place to wear it? The first part of that question has a couple different answers, and the second one is very personal.
Choke up on the mic.
What?
Choke up on the mic.
Keeps getting out of the way. So as to why I wear a knife, 2 reasons. The first is that when you spear a fish, all you're doing is poking a hole in the fish. If you take that shaft out, it's going to keep flopping around, depending on the fish, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for days. So one of the things that you have to do when you're spearfishing, not unlike when you're bird hunting, you're going to come up on the fish. It's still going to be alive. You're going to have to kill it. The 2 most common ways of doing that are ripping the gills out and stabbing it in the brain. Most people do both. Ripping the gills out has the added benefit of bleeding the fish, which will generally result in a higher quality, less fishy tasting meat. Stabbing it in the brain is the quickest way to humanely kill the fish. And if you're looking at it from the top, you kind of go, about a 1/2 inch behind the eyes on that midline, and just stab your knife in there. And you will see what I am doing right now. You want to be really careful not to stab yourself in the hand.
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
There you go. Because you use these stiletto.
I think we might have lost the audio on these guys, but I'm going to say one thing there. If you shoot a really big fish, do not try to swim up and brain it right away, because that's a really good way to get into some serious trouble. So like if you're going after a really, really big fish, you want to let that fish just expire. If you put a good shot on it, let it take your float line, let it take your gun, let it go. And then come in, because a lot of people get really hurt by shooting like a giant tuna or sea bass or yellowtail, and they come up on it immediately and the thing's just thrashing and they're trying to brain it, and that's a really good way to get stabbed. So just keep that in mind, that a lot of times the best course of action is just to wait, but in general you're not going to run into that problem unless you're you're like Charlie over here who's shooting just giants on the regular. The rest of us shooting normal size fish, you can probably just go ahead and brain it. But again, yes, don't stab yourself in the hand by going through it, because I've done that and it sucks.
Yeah, I've done that multiple times. It's a great way to give yourself problems with tendons in your fingers. It's not great.
I just did a video. We were down in Costa Rica like a week or two ago, and we shot a couple tuna, and you'll see in the video, or you hear it in the video, I'm in there trying to slice the tissue. So the best way to bleed the fish is to cut the tissue in the artery behind the gills. You can rip it out too, but from what I understand, cutting that tissue works a little better. And so I'm in there trying to cut the tissue while my hand is in, and you hear me go, I think I got it. I definitely still have like a nice scar on the finger from that one.
Yeah. So to your next question, so that the second reason you carry a knife is because if you are diving around reefs or wrecks or some other kind of structure, there are going to be hook and line fishermen who frequent those areas too. Entanglement is a very real possibility. Told you earlier about getting tangled in a lobster pot anchor and or boat anchor. I have been hooked by a crankbait twice, and I'm sure it will happen again. It's not a pleasant experience, and I promise you, unless the guy on the other end of the line just enjoys messing with people, like they're not going to know the difference between you and a fish. They're going to reel you in, and sometimes you're just going to have to cut yourself free. Having a quality blade that's capable of cutting yourself free can be the difference between life and death, especially when you're dealing with big, powerful fish. Your spear gun is going to have a heavy-duty monofilament shooting line on it. And depending on how it's rigged up, this can either go straight to the gun, it can go to a heavy-duty float line, or like mine, it can be connected to Dyneema on a reel. This stuff has like a 1,400-pound tensile strength. It's a pain in the ass. You do get tangled in it. I got tangled in it several times on Saturday. And if you've got a big, powerful fish on the other end of this and you get tangled in this, it's going to take you down with it. There's a really good video floating around online of Tank Sade, who's an Australian freedive world record holder. Also was in Gilmore Girls for a hot second.
How do you know that?
And he shot a white sea bass in LA, and it wrapped his shooting line around both of his feet. And then if you notice on like full foot pocket freediving fins, there's usually a tab on the back of it that helps you take them on and off. Ryan's pointing it out right now. The line got caught on those tabs, and so he couldn't loosen the line enough to get it off, and this fish just starts yanking him around under the kelp. And because it had both of his feet, he didn't have any foot free to kick his way to the surface, and you see him struggle over and over again to like get back to the surface, take a really quick breath, and then just get sucked right back under. Having a knife to cut yourself free from situations like that, whether it's your own shooting line, whether it's another fisherman's line, whether it's something random stuck on the bottom, is really critical. And that bleeds into your the second part of your question about where to put the knife. That's a really personal thing. For me, I like to have my primary kill knife because it's a little big, strapped to my calf, on the inside of my calf. If you go like, old school James Bond, thunderball and strapped to the outside of your calf, in California, you swim through kelp for more than 2 minutes and you're going to hate yourself because it's just going to snag on everything. You rotate that around to the inside of your calf, life's much nicer. And then I usually like to have a second knife as a backup because you will drop your knives, you will lose your knives when you need them most. I like to have a second knife either on my arm or on my belt. A lot of guys around here like to have them on their arms. I don't love that because, again, a lot of the diving we're doing around here, you're reaching into cracks and crevices and holes, and you want to make sure that if you need a knife because you reach into a hole and get tangled on something, that knife is not attached, like only reachable from the hand that is now tangled, right? So you want to give some thought to what's the worst case scenario, what am I going to be using this knife for, and position it accordingly.
Make sure your knife is accessible by both hands.
We got a couple more questions real quick. So one of them, best Bay Area shop for free dive classes and gear.
Bamboo Reef, San Francisco and Monterey.
So there's a few really good freedive spearfishing shops on the West Coast. They're peppered throughout the whole coast from north to south. There's a lot of scuba shops that carry spearfishing gear. So knowing the difference is big. For us in Monterey County, Bamboo Reef has been a huge supporter of everything we've done, from personal diving to what Fin Forage has become. They have great staff that's knowledgeable from experience, and they let us use their shop for stuff like this. But they have a ton of freedive gear, and they offer all of the Fin Forage community and the Monterey Bay Tritons some pretty significant discounts on freedive classes, on trips, on gear, and all that kind of stuff. So we personally like to encourage Bamboo if you're in this area. There's a lot of other good shops if you're in other areas, Northern California, Oregon, Central California. There's a few. There's a lot to list.
And I will say Bamboo is a scuba shop that carries freedive gear, but they've really made a consolidated effort over the last couple of years to kind of build out the freediving and spearfishing component of what they do very deliberately. And so in a lot of ways, they are like a freediving shop that sells scuba gear.
Just in the interest of time, I'm going to go to this next question. Conservation and reproduction wise, is it best to shoot the bigger fish or the smaller fish?
Great question. It really depends. A lot of the fish around here, so the fish vary wildly in terms of growth rate, lifespan, and fecundity, which is when in their lifespan they're at their maximum reproductive value. So it really varies from species to species. A lot of fish that we shoot around here in Northern California, rockfish, lingcod, cabezon, they are slow growing, slow maturing fish. So the bigger, older fish are typically going to be like your heavy duty breeders. They, for lack, that's a gross way to put it, I'm not gonna say that actually, but they tend to have higher reproductive success later in life. So leaving the big ones, if you choose to do that, is great. The way the regulations are structured for those fish is kind of the other way around, where you can't take the small ones, but you can take the bigger ones. It's really up to you what you want to do. Their fishery can support it. That's why the regulation is written that way. Other fish like Dorado or mahi-mahi are a prime example of this, are a really fast growing, high fecundity species. You can shoot as many of those things as you want, and you're not going to have make a dent in the population.
And it makes a lot of, it matters quite a bit where you're at. California is one of the best regulated fisheries, one of, and we've talked at length on this question with a lot of the scientists that are in charge of putting regulations in place. And it's, if the regulations there, at least in California, like you're probably okay. They take into consideration that the daily limit will not harm the fishery over time. That being said, you can take it a step further with your personal ethic and not shoot big female lingcod certain times of the year because you know they've got a bunch of eggs in them. But I do know that it's 9:30. We didn't get to cover food, which is my favorite part. Food is what started Fin Forage. I feel like there's a lot to say about that, and a whole nother topic we could probably get into with favorite recipes and different cool, weird stuff that you'd never think is actually good to use in food, but like seaweed can do so much for a recipe. It creates natural MSG, and there's just so much fun stuff that spearfishing is simply a process of gathering food, and it's a beautiful process. It's an adventurous process. It's a process that you do with friends and community, and that's what we love at Fin Forage. It's all about the community and the adventure and the friends. So I don't know if we do another one of these later, but I just want to make sure we're being respectful of time and stuff as well.
We would love, I mean, obviously, anytime you BHA wants to have us back on, we love what you guys do. We love to share our message and obviously talk at length. I mean, we could all talk about spearfishing till 1 o'clock tonight, but with people waiting for us at home, and I'm sure somebody's getting screamed at, like, when are you going to stop watching that? So, we love that all you guys are here. We definitely, I mean, Devin, if you're okay, if I do a little bit of a plug.
Yeah, of course, go for it.
So we are constantly working on content. If you like to read like Andrew does, please check out finandforage.com. It has all of this stuff in detail and many blogs, including recipes. We're working on our podcast where it's a lot more of this, but with people who are many, many times more experienced and have different experiences throughout the world that you guys might be able to take into play as well. And we're just trying to, again, educate everyone and create a knowledgeable, responsible, and safe community that, we can all get out there and have fun and enjoy this beautiful, beautiful sport. So.
Yep. Someone just posted a question. Will this be recorded? It is being recorded, and we will post it later.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely will be recorded, and definitely going to be added to, because there's a lot on our agenda that we didn't get to. Food especially, but just talking about conservation.
Conservation is a big one.
I think that's what draws a lot of us to this equation, and what really like motivates a lot of us, and that's really what BHA is all about. And so
I would love to have
the tip of the iceberg here. I'd love to jump into that. And we could obviously talk about food forever. The California chapter just did a wild game cook-off at our annual rendezvous, and seafood was like the key component. And Hank Shaw, who is from Northern California, was actually one of the judges, and I think he gave us the highest marks on the seafood. We had like seafood, wild boar, a few different things, but so I mean, there's a whole world there, obviously, and the foraging aspect. We got to talk about foraging.
That's literally what launched us, was a catch and cook competition that was like uncharacteristically successful. It was rad. So yeah, and I would love to have Ariella. She writes for Forbes Science. She's a stud in the conservation world. She would be rad to have on the next one, because she would have a lot to offer on that. So maybe we put a second one on.
Anytime you guys want, we're here. We love to talk.
That's right. Part 2 soon. That's right, Michael.
What happened?
We got you.
I just want to say thanks, guys, for joining us. I know that you had to do a lot to put this together. And Charlie, thanks for joining us from Baja. We're all living vicariously. And thanks for everybody that jumped on the webinar, and we'll absolutely be doing more of these. And then we're going to be doing some in-person seminars in the state through BHA. So absolutely we'll have some sort of food related spearfishing event. Definitely in Southern California, but hopefully Central and Northern California. We'll just try to hit all the spots, and
we'll throw a catch and cook competition for you.
Let's do it. I'm in. I mean, I'm all about that one. We can expand it too. It doesn't have to be just spearfishing. We can make it a hook and cook too, and get kayak fishermen out. I certainly love to dabble there as well. So a lot of different ways to get after it, and stoked to be here with you guys. Thank you again, and thanks everybody for showing up.
Yeah, thank you all.
Have a great night.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Devin.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, guys. Empty glass.
Clink. Devin got progressively sexier through this whole thing.
Good year. It's also the 14 inches of hair that I lost. I don't know. I missed the hair.
14 years younger.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, dude.
Guys.
Have a good one.
Yeah. Good night, guys.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
See you, everybody.